Okay. I just have questions about like what was your path to working on the Hill and stuff like that.
Right, the career
Yeah.
focus ones.
Oh yes,
Um,
it's social work. Okay, then that's we can follow whatever one you want.
yeah, I mean, we could go with that, and then if time permitting, I do have like a short slide deck that just really captures some of the approaches that I use in doing political social work. So, you know,
Okay,
I'll share that as well.
sounds good.
Yeah,
Um,
Would you
I
like
should come
people
get
to
my
be
stuff.
on the screen as well?
would I what? I'm sorry.
Would you like people to be on the screen? Because I know like sometimes they just come in. Would you like for them to request to also be on the screen?
Yeah, I like to see people
Yeah. Okay.
because
I'll
this
let
is
you know when more people join.
yeah, this is office hours as opposed to a presentation.
Okay.
So I would prefer that. That'd be great.
Okay. We'll just wait till like 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
How are you, Erica? What's going on spring break?
Um, Still a lot of assignments to be mindful of for when we return back.
Mm-hmm.
But today is kind of like the highlight, and just making sure I don't miss this. Dr. Hussein, Altaf Hussein, I'm his graduate assistant, so it was definitely highly, highly encouraged. I was gonna come anyway,
Right.
so this is definitely, even though it falls on our during our spring break time, we still have like a good amount of students who were able to register and be a part of today.
Yeah.
So, I'm excited to, make sure that our students got on, and I've been able to glean a lot. So I'm good on my end. Just been taking some notes, and
Well,
just this is a perfect complement to what I got from campaign school. So
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
perfect.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been meeting with NASW about is creating a bridge
Yeah.
between the campaign school and NASW and the schools of social work. That all of this should be, really um, organized in a manner that they build on each other.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I'm glad to see that you're doing that, that you're actually taking advantage of all of these ways to prepare you to do this work. That's really
Hmm.
good. It's really good. So,
Yes. Thank you.
and you're here in DC too, that's
Right.
cool.
Yeah. That's one of
So,
the reasons, why I chose Howard, why I chose to do the program on campus, because there are just certain things, people, events that you really can't obtain unless you are there physically.
right.
So, I definitely think that Howard has been a perfect central location to kind of take off.
Yeah. Are you here during the summer?
Yes.
Oh, like this summer.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have an internship for this summer?
I don't as of yet. I recently put in internship application with my Congressman Bobby Scott,
Okay.
to see if that could be a possibility for a summer internship. Because I'm full time student, so I'm not technically working. So that is something that I've been just trying to research internship
Well,
opportunities
stay in
specifically with
touch with me
policy. Okay.
because if not with his office, then I know of an opportunity on the Hill with um, the Congresswoman from the great state of Delaware, my sister,
Mhm. Yes,
and
and
she.
I saw hers actually on social media, and I just sometimes when I see those that are for different states, and I know that they prefer like their constituents, so
Yes.
I wasn't sure how that works sometimes. That's why I just started with
No, you
Virginia
should.
as my place.
You
Okay,
should. That's what I would advise anyone. That first of all, you should be a registered voter,
right.
and then apply in their district, um, or apply in places where you have connections. And
Hmm.
I know her office reached out to me and said, "Do you have any social work interns? Because we would
Okay.
like to have social work interns."
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so that's one of the things that I really wanted to to share with all of you today is that, make those connections because it leads to opportunities, right? But share your information with me, Erica, because I
Okay.
really would like to make that happen. And Rebecca, are you here in DC?
Yes, I'm here in DC currently. I'm actually in the NASW building. I'm in conference room A.
You're around the
Um,
corner.
I'm just around the corner. But I'm just here for a couple days. I'm finishing my master's of social work at the University of Michigan, but I'm actually moving to DC at the end of next month. So I'm going to start looking for some full-time opportunities.
And what's your area?
I focus on gender-based violence and criminal legal reform, and I'm in macro, so policy and political.
Let me tell you something. I just had dinner last night with the interim director of the Justice Policy Institute.
That's where I'm doing my practicum. So that's
you
where
know
I'm
Paul
headed to
Ashton.
intern. I haven't met him yet, but that's where I'll be starting in May. So
Paul,
I'm finishing my 3-month internship and then full-time jobs.
that's crazy. So Paul, we became friends when he volunteered on the Obama campaign in 2008. So what's 403? Let me just talk first. Is that Nakia?
Nikaya.
Nakaya. Hi, Nakaya. Marla.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you
Nice
for
to
taking
meet you.
time for this.
Oh, look, somebody took the time for me. So, I think it's an obligation and a responsibility, and all of you will do the same thing. Once you get to the next level, you reach back and you bring some more along with you. So, Nakaya, where are you in school? Because we have University of Michigan here. We have Howard.
Absolutely. I'm going to Howard as well.
HU.
Esther. And right now I'm working as a housing case manager, and I'm using that as my employee field-based hours. But I want to get more into the advocacy side, the policy side, because I see there's a need. There's some holes just working on the front line. So, right.
Okay. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Mariah?
Yes, hi, I'm Mariah. I go to school at Columbia University, and I used to work on Capitol Hill for 3 years.
In which capacity?
I was a staff assistant and legislative correspondent for Congresswoman Gwen Moore.
Okay, yes, I know Congresswoman Moore. So are you from Milwaukee?
No, I grew up in Georgia. So to Rebecca's point, I mean, I'm not Rebecca, I think it's Erica. Yeah, you can definitely apply to other offices. I got a job in a different office. I interned for someone from Georgia, since the person that represented my district didn't align with my political leanings. So definitely just try to get in where you can fit in.
I say that all the time. Get in where you fit in, man. I'm always, even where you don't fit in, just get in, and then you can make the move. Yeah. So let me give you guys a little background about myself, and just so you understand, office hours is not a presentation, even though I do have like a PowerPoint, to kind of, if I decide to use it. But this is really an opportunity for you guys to ask me questions. So and to learn more about political advocacy. It's really like, it is lobbying, but we don't want to call it lobbying because that has sometimes a negative connotation. But it's being in political spaces and looking at things from a social work perspective, to really speak on behalf of marginalized communities. So but it's happening within political systems, right? So it's like, how do I get in so that I can advocate? How do I get in and be at the table so that I can be that representation, not only for our profession, but also for communities that are not historically invited to the table. So, I love doing this kind of work. I love being the only social worker in the room, and bringing people's attention to the skills and the abilities that we have, and also to really help to paint the picture, because legislators often need our expertise, but they don't know it. until we're there, right? We give them the story, the case study that we may provide helps to push forward the legislation that they want to push forward. We put a face to the issue, right? And so how I got here, how I got involved in politics as a social worker, I established my story. I shared my origin story at the beginning of this conference. I don't know how many of you were actually on that call at the very beginning, but it all started with my dad, who was a social worker, is a social worker, and he's actually about to celebrate his 80th birthday in 2 weeks. But in 1966, he enrolled at Rutgers University, and same year I was born, so I'm a born social worker, and his I guess just the way that he represented the profession inspired me. And he demonstrated to me the versatility of the degree, how he can help to bring about social change, regardless of the title or position that he was holding. He was an educational administrator. He was worked in people settlement at a settlement house as a program director. He was a director of Title I programs, did multiple things. But all of it was focused on using his knowledge and his resources and his network to help those that didn't have that. And so, you know, in the last 5 or 10 years, everyone's talking about privilege, but, you know, understanding education as privilege, he was using that privilege to help those who didn't have access to that information, right? And I watched that growing up. And so from the age of 9 until now, I've been involved in politics, you know, handing out literature at the age of 9, working at polling places at the age of 16, and voting in every single election, school board all the way up to president, ever since I could vote. And through all of that, it made me understand how important it was to be civically engaged. I saw it in real time that if you are not a part of the political process, you know, you really do not have say in what happens in your life. And I wanted to help that. And so when I received my MSW and was in New Jersey, I realized that I could not really impact the structural issues that were the root cause of some of the individual issues that exist, because I didn't know all of the players in New Jersey. I didn't understand the politics of New Jersey. And that understanding existed in Delaware. So my return to Delaware to work in politics was so that I could be effective. I know the people, I know the issues, I have history here, I have relationships here. And, you know, that's what happened. Returned to Delaware, worked on many state and local races. At the beginning, volunteering. It was never my job to be involved in politics. To me, it was a representation of the code of ethics. It was my obligation, as the standard states, that we are supposed to be engaged in political and social action. But I wasn't doing this for work, right? I was doing this because it was right. I've always worked. I've always made good money as a macro social worker, working in nonprofits and in government offices. But my political involvement was always on my time. I was always volunteering until 2005. That's when I was employed to work for the United States Senator Joe Biden as I moved back to Delaware, because I knew if I was going to be in Delaware, I wanted to be in the most powerful office in the state. He had served 3 terms and more than 3 terms, 3 decades in the Senate at that point. And I knew with his name, I could open doors. If I pick up the phone and say, hello, I'm Marla calling from Senator Biden's office, they were like, oh, what does she need? What does she want? And so I used that as an opportunity to really target communities and nonprofits and populations that his office historically had not really worked with closely, right? He was representing the state, but I mean, I was targeting communities that needed his representation. And so I created a federal grants workshop for minority-owned nonprofits and faith-based organizations that never got federal dollars because they didn't have the technical skills to apply for those dollars. I taught them how to write grants, right? All the while, everything that I did, it had social work at its core, but it was government work. But I knew what my purpose was there with my degree was to do that government work with an understanding that I want to impact the human condition. I don't, so a lot of things. You can pull my bio up on LinkedIn to see, what I did when I worked for Biden. But in the process of working there, I was seen as being very effective in really advocating for the community and garnered much respect from others in elected offices. And then Biden decided to run for president in 2007. I went to Iowa on my own dime to campaign for him. Now, mind you, every opportunity that I've ever had has come from me starting out volunteering because I believe in something or I believe in someone. It wasn't, I found it on Indeed and I applied. Every job, including the one I currently have at Rutgers as an associate professor, started by someone seeing my passion and understanding my commitment to the work that I'm doing. And they either create a job for me or they find a place in their office for me because they see the value, right? I volunteered, flew up to Iowa and was campaigning for Joe Biden at a time where there was the first woman running for president that was viable, Hillary Clinton, the first Black man that was running. And I'm up in Iowa stomping for an old white guy. Right? People are like, what the, why are you going to Iowa? Because I don't think those two can win, but they like white guys. And I think that his values align with our values. He didn't do well in Iowa at all, but the Obama people saw me there. So when the general came around, they were like, we need a state director in Delaware. What about Biden's girl that we saw in Iowa? She'd be great in Delaware. I was chosen to be the state director for that campaign. 3 weeks later, they selected Joe Biden to be the vice president. And to this day, we joke about the fact he says, you sure know how to pick them. You beat me here first, right? So, but all of the move that I've done has been, I don't know, it just all aligns to social work. And so now currently I'm an associate professor at Rutgers, and I teach advocacy, I teach political social work, I teach community organizing, and I also am a senior advisor to Delaware's Congresswoman, who is my sister, that I help run the campaign and get her elected. She's been elected 4 times, and there's much chatter about her running for U.S. Senate. I'm not going to say anything about that, but it's a real possibility, let's just say. And there are a lot of people that want to see that happen because we don't have any Black women in the Senate, and we don't have any Black women that have ever been governor. So they're looking to her because she has run and won statewide 4 elections in a row. Her congressional seat, they call it the 3rd senator because she represents the entire state. So she's done it already. It's just a matter of whether or not she wants to challenge the incumbent. So I am involved in politics. I serve as an advisor and a consultant to federal, state, and local candidates. I help with their messaging. I help with candidate development, helping them to answer the why, who are you and why are you running? And I look for candidates that I think align with my values. So that's that. I don't know how many other questions we have, but that's how I got here. And that's how I got to the Hill too, because after working with one, building a reputation, then they all know you. At least a third of Congress knows me, and I've never been elected to Congress. But they know that I can get people to Congress. They know that, I can help them articulate their vision to their constituents. When I was in Biden's office, in addition to being a projects manager and focusing on health, education, and housing, I was also the director of constituent services, because we can bridge that. We know how to talk to individuals as well as work in community. So, yeah, so that's me.
Thank you, Marla. And if whoever is in the watching this, you can feel free to join us as well on the screen so that we can see you guys and you guys can participate with us.
Yes.
And we appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions so far? We want this to be, we have more people. We want this to be interactive.
Yeah, conversation. Like,
Here we go.
Anything. Someone says, well, in these comments or questions that they gave us, it was one of them was, what was it like moving from the Hill to your current work? I never left the Hill because as I am a professor of professional practice, work in politics informs what I teach in the classroom. So I find it necessary that I stay engaged in state and local politics, and really understand what's happening so that I can bring that to the students. So I never moved off the Hill. But let me just say that wherever you go, those relationships, a lot of what has been said at this conference is going to be reiterated, from the advocacy breakouts to the keynote speech. It is all about building relationships. And I see that Jessica put power in relationships. That's one of our 6 core values. And we say these core values, but what does it mean to live it out? The building of relationships is not networking, because it's not transactional. It's not about what can I get from this, right? It's reciprocal. You're building together, right? And so when every time I engage with someone, I'm hoping that something comes out of it. I don't want it to be like, okay, nice to see you, goodbye. When I know when Erica joined this call and we met at the campaign school 2 weeks ago, I was so excited. Like, oh, we met before. I can help her, right? Always thinking about how can I contribute to this relationship, right? To make it stronger so that it serves both of us, right? Relationships are really what makes politics. It really is. And if you don't have them, you can cultivate and build them, right? The last session that I did Zoom wise, I mentioned LinkedIn, and I looked 2-3 days later, 2 of the students actually reached out to me on LinkedIn. Missed opportunities. So often you could be in the presence of individuals that can create opportunities, but you do not take advantage of them. LinkedIn is easy. And I know everybody's like, I have a LinkedIn page, but I barely use it. I was the same way until my niece, who's a social worker, she's 35. She said, Auntie, I can fix your LinkedIn page and I can increase your traffic. And I was like, okay, fix it. She said, yeah, we'll put some links here and get a cover photo, and gave it to her. Traffic went up 800%. And you're like, well, I don't need a job. I have a job. But what it does is it allows me to connect with others so that I have people in different places, so that when you come on a call like this, I can say to Rebecca, do you know Paul Ashton? You're interested in JPI. Erica, or you're in DC, you need an internship, right? That's what this is all about. This is about relationships. So yeah, if you really want to do something in politics, get to know people and don't be afraid to approach people.
On that note, do you have any advice on how to cultivate these relationships, or how to step out of your comfort zone in order to build these relationships or interact or approach
Yes. So
without thinking that, oh, I'm getting some, not,
I know what you mean.
yeah,
You don't
okay,
want to
thank you.
offend somebody or,
Yeah.
approach somebody and they're like, why is he or she bothering me? First of all, bother everybody. So what? Don't get offended. And if they get offended, who cares? I mean, really, it doesn't really matter. But LinkedIn is my first suggestion. And then the second thing is to really just participate in things like this. Meeting other like-minded individuals at the campaign school, at CRISP, go to conferences. Conferences are critical. It just, you meet other people and they have opportunities for you. And then I personally think that, you need to be involved on your local level. You need to be a part of the civic association. You need to be understanding what's happening at city council. Go to and not with anything in mind other than understanding what is happening in your community, right? Just make those connections. I think that's it. As far as how to approach people, I had a student this week in class, and she said that, like, she's always had a fear of public speaking, that she's not really comfortable speaking in front of others. And I explained to her that everything requires practice. You just have to practice it. And I said, the more you practice it, the easier it'll become. And I said, for example, in class, I said, for the rest of the semester, I want you to say something in class. It's a Zoom class. I said, I said, and you don't even have to say anything other than, I agree with what my classmate just said. I said, just practice that. I think you need to practice being in front of people. But the last thing is this: if you know what you're talking about, then you shouldn't have any fear. You are the subject matter expert on you. So if you're going up to someone, talk about you. They can't critique that, right? And talk about them, right? Most of the ways that I engage people is really through gratitude, and that they love. Anybody loves to hear thank you so much for whatever. They're like, oh, you're welcome. Thank you for representing us in Congress. I really appreciated your vote on whatever. You're welcome. Yeah. And as a social work student at whatever, that's one of the things we're studying. Then they're going to ask you a question. Really? Well, what do you want to do with that degree? That's it. Right? It's all in the gratitude with a little bit of you. Storytelling is critical when it comes to political advocacy and political social work. That's in one of my slides, talking about how to really tell good stories. When you're doing political advocacy, it's all about storytelling. You're either telling the story of the issue that and how it pertains to you, but you're always telling a story. And the goal of your stories in advocacy and in communication and building relationships is that you need to grab people's attention in a story. Then you need to engage them in the story, and then you need to move them to action. That's the best story there is. You have to introduce yourself, you have to grab their attention, you have to engage them in the story, and then you have to move people to action. That's it. Right? And so you practice it. You practice it like, okay, what is your thing? If they ask, well, why social work? You should be able to answer that. And your why of social work can actually be used over and over again in different settings and for different topics, because it's all going to go back to your why you're doing this in social work in the first place. So I say, work on your story, right? Work on your story. And then the other thing is, don't be afraid to get turned down, or someone tells you no, or, they don't return your email. So what? You just keep reaching out. I think it's also important, as I sit here at NASW, right? I'm here for a reason. I want NASW to do different. Okay. I want them to be more responsive to the 21st century social worker. I want membership to reflect the financial situations that most social workers are in. But I also understand the value of NASW. I understand that professional organizations legitimize us. And it is the organizing effort that we should be utilizing to create social change. Its membership is 100,000 members. There are 700,000 social workers. We should all be a part of NASW. Now, how do we make it affordable? How do we make it effective? We do it by becoming members and then changing it. We have new leadership with NASW right now. And now is the time for us to look at our professional organization as a vehicle to move our profession forward. So join organizations, go out in community, practice your story, your why, right? I gave a long why of why I'm in social work, but the short why is my father inspired me. I saw the good that he did in the world. I understood that politics was one of the many things that he used to create change, and I want to be just like him. And my goal is to get as many social workers in politics as I can. That's my why. That's my story, right? I already got 3 social work Hill placements just from the last 24 hours because I was saying this. Marla, why are you here? Well, I'm here because it's Student Advocacy Day and there are social workers that want to be on the Hill. And I didn't know you were a social worker. Yeah, you didn't know I was a social worker? My dad was the story, your story. That's the most important tool in political advocacy. Question?
Hi, Professor Carter. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Hi. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Very inspired by it. I'm a first-year MSW student. This is actually my second act in life because I've done undergrad. I'm an entrepreneur. I've written a book. I've raised 2 young adult children that are in college now. So I'm rejoining. But to your point of being inspired, and my why is definitely in line with what you're talking about, just affecting change, trying to impact the world positively. But my question to you is, you made a very powerful statement that resonated, was that if you cannot complain about what's going on in the world if you're not voting and you're not involved. And so how do you translate that? Because with social media now, you have people who are very powerful as far as entertainment and in media, who spread messaging that, they really don't know what they're talking about. So how do you, and they have so much power and influence that they have people now thinking we don't need to vote, or we're going to hold the Black vote, or we're going to hold this vote. And it's just, and so what are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about trying to, dismantle that type of thinking, especially for our youth? Because they're the ones who have to, and they're not really involved. They're not involved locally. People blame Obama for things that are not getting done. They blame Biden, but then you have so many local issues that people are just so disconnected with. So how do we bridge those gaps? Because those are the major gaps that can be changed if people were involved and really knew what they were talking about.
Absolutely. How do you change the narrative of it doesn't, the apathy, and how do, okay, so a couple things. I think it's important that we don't try to change the world right away. I think we need to change our home, right? Are your kids voting? Are you, just from your example, like affecting those that are closer to you? This is like the ecological perspective. The ones that listen to you, that respect you, right? More so than an influencer, even. And focus there. I would not focus on trying to create like some kind of social media presence that goes viral. You're not an influencer. Now, I did talk to the NASW about like, hello, let's contract with some influencers. There are ways to combat misinformation, on a large scale. But on a small scale, how do you confront the misinformation, and how do you move people to action that are hearing over and over again that it doesn't matter, or that nobody's doing anything, or you do it locally. You do it where you actually can touch and you can help them to see the difference. But you can only do that is if you're informed, right? So I think a big part of what needs to be happening right now in the social work profession is not voter registration, but voter education. We need to be focusing right now, year and a half before the presidential election, on what are the issues, right? How do you know how to vote? Like, when are the deadlines for registration? Do you have same day voting? Becoming, as social workers, us becoming more informed of the political process, and not getting into the social media back and forth, those fights about abortion or the issues, the identity issue things, but really focusing on the process, right, of getting people involved in the electoral process and understanding that, the importance of that. I do it on the local level. I do it by, helping, like I said before, candidates run that can motivate people to get involved, right? Because if they know the candidates that are local that they like and they respect, if you have better candidates on the local level, you'll see higher voter turnout on a statewide level, which then leads to a higher voter turnout nationally. So there's that. But when it comes to people that are disenfranchised or really not a part of the discussion of being involved in politics, and they feel that it doesn't represent who they are, what I do is I look for representation, and then I magnify that through my friend group on my social media platforms so that they see. So I counter the negative with as much positive as I can. I don't engage the negative. Is that helpful? Yeah. Yeah. And I do some of the things that may seem like kind of pointless, but I do it anyway. And I like hashtags. I hashtag away, man. I'm a hashtagging fool.
Yeah, I like that. Just not even involving negative, just doing what you just put the action in motion, and just move in that on the groundwork. And I think sometimes it can get a little frustrating when you see people who have a lot of influence. Again, entertainment and sports, they do influence a lot of people.
You think they do, but when someone that they love and admire that's close to them says something contradictory to that,
right,
you'd be surprised. It's understanding your power. Don't assume,
very true,
that just because Oprah said it, that's going to stay with you more so than me, the person that you see every single day that's living out something. You're going to think twice if I continue to say the opposite of that.
Correct.
But so it's us being consistent, not distracted by the negative, just being consistent, right? And this is why it's important.
Yes.
And this is and knowing the issues. Let me tell you, when people say, and by no means am I like some Biden groupie. I'm not the crime bill or Anita Hill or some of the shit he did stuff he did in the 90s, and and I let him know when I got on staff, you need to atone for some of this. But what I can say about this administration, and this is what's not being told right now, is that this is the most diverse administration ever. When you have the Secretary of the Interior being the first Indigenous woman ever to sit in that seat, that's major, right? She is the Secretary of her own land. That should be told. A Black woman that's the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, that should be told, right? But we let them tell parts of the story. He has the most diverse cabinet ever. That's number one. Number two, when he came in, his administration requested that every agency look at their hiring and their practices to address systemic racism, as well as coming up with recommendations. So we're talking all this stuff about dismantling this and structural that. He's doing it, but that's not a part of the story, right? So it's like understanding what are the criticisms And just quickly, just having simple talking points. Well, that infrastructure bill, it created X amount of jobs, or, well, the Chips and Science Act, that's a big deal, because we none of us could even function without the chips. And now those chips are going to be made here in the United States. Or the PACT Act. We fought for years to get better benefits for veterans. They were able to do that. Or the gun control bill. They hadn't been able to pass any kind of gun legislation for 30 years. And that was just in 2 years. History is going to show that he was so effective in his first 2 years, but because, we're coming off of the heels of Trump, that we were all just feeling relieved. We didn't even look at what was really being accomplished, right? And again, we focus on always the negative, like, yeah, but. No, yeah, right? So you become informed, not combative, because as a social worker, we engage in active listening. I hear you. I understand your frustration. I know what you mean, but have you thought about this? Were you aware of that? I think maybe we might be going in the right direction, right? So you engage in conversation, but you can't if you don't have the information. Where do you get the information? whitehouse.gov, your congressional member in their office, right? There's so many places, but look for the wins and be more focused on the positive. I know that we as social workers are always looking to fix an issue, but let's do this from a strengths perspective, even in political advocacy, right? Let's do some asset mapping instead of a needs assessment. That's what I do.
Thank you. That was great, especially the part about wanting to fix everything. I think sometimes that can get overwhelming and cause paralysis emotionally.
But you focus on the things. It's you know what it's like? It's like the serenity prayer. Focus on the things that you can change, right? I can impact my family. I can make sure that everybody that I know votes, right? Just everybody I know. Right? On election day or 10 days before election day, I just remind everybody, early voting starts today. Has everyone voted? I'm not talking about a full-on, casting aspersions and making people feel guilty, but taking a picture of your I voted sticker and say, hey, did you guys vote? It's important. Hashtag something, I don't know, right? It's little things, but it has to be like your brand, like that's who you are. Yeah. Nakaya, you were gonna.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I wanted to ask you about, do you have any experience or know if any others that are working on the Hill that are licensed, that have their licensure, and more importantly, would be willing to supervise a student or supervise someone who wants to be licensed, but also wants that experience, or the experience, but also contribute their social work, their macro social work skills in that way?
Not that are licensed clinical social workers. LMSWs, yes. But not LCSW on the Hill. You don't have clinicians that are actively practicing in that regard. I know a lot of LMSWs or MSWs on the Hill that are licensed, that serve as deputy chief of staff. I know a lot of legislative assistants. Joanna Hayes, just the Congresswoman from Connecticut, she approached me and said, yeah, your sister said that she's looking to get social workers. She said, I already have social workers in my office. So yes, there are field placements that can be had on the Hill, but not for clinical hours. No, I don't know of any. Is that what you were thinking of for clinical hours?
Well, yes. As far like if you had someone that was, let's just say passionate, or their main goal is mental health, that,
Right.
something along those lines. And let's say they happen to have their license, their clinical license.
I'm not aware of anyone, but that person will be really, that's cool.
Mm.
I'll look for it. Nikaya,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
hit me up, and
I
I'm gonna
will.
find one.
Okay, we'll find it together.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yes. Rebecca?
Hi. So I'm graduating in this July and I'm starting a career and I'm interested in political advocacy, things like that. But eventually, like in the next 2 decades or so, I would love to run for office or be involved in some kind of public office. Do you have any advice for how to get started or where to jump in there?
Like I did, you just start volunteering for a candidate that you really respect. I've never worked on a campaign that I didn't really respect the candidate and that I didn't think would add a unique voice or perspective to the electoral process. I really believed in them. And I think that I would start there. And what happens is a good volunteer becomes someone that you find money and they become paid staff. And then from there, opportunities come. I definitely think that, have you done the campaign school yet?
I haven't done the campaign school, but I did work on the Michigan campaign that flipped us to the Dem trifecta this year.
Exactly. So the campaign school or Emily's List has a training for women candidates. Do you guys know what Emily's List is? Emily's List is a political action committee here in Washington. It's the largest in the country. And Emily is not a person, but actually an acronym. It stands for Early Money In. Early money is like yeast. That's Emily. It makes the dough rise. So they raise money for women candidates. But what they also do is they help to support the candidates with different consultants and just to prepare them so that they are competitive, right? They have a training for young female candidates or people that want to run. I think it's called something Women Run. I can't. A friend of mine used to be the executive director of that. I forgot what it's called. But if you look up Emily's List, there's that. They have it. There are a lot of trainings like that would help you to get a better understanding of the organization. Of what it takes to run. What I would say is that in addition to doing that, as much as many people are not fans of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, that binary that we're forced to choose between, the structures that exist in state parties are something that you should become aware of if you are going to run someday. So I would say that you learn and get engaged in your state party. They're broken up into representative districts, and the RDs have their own committees. The representative districts have their own committees. Getting put on a committee to represent that district means that you would volunteer for candidates running in that district. Back to what I said before about local. It's all about local. So getting involved there, seeing how campaigns rely on the state party, how the endorsement process happens, who are the big donors that are in the mix in your state or in your city or your county. It gives you an inside look at the political process of your state, right? So getting involved in the state party would be one. Looking for an organization like Emily's List and their training for candidates in order to be prepared for that. And then once you're ready to run, you have to make sure that everyone in your life is ready to run too. You can't run if your spouse or your family or your support group is not there for you, because that is what you need more than anything else. You need a supportive network to make it happen. So that's what I would say. And the other thing, this is another thing, and this is for all of you in general, whether you're running or not running, get to know your representatives. Just let them know who you are, right? And also, they'll see you as a resource, as an expert in your area and will be calling on you for help as opposed to you calling on them, right? But you have to build the relationship and they have to get to know who you are. So get to know your representatives. And you don't have to go to Washington to know your congresspeople. They have district offices. They have district days. Go to town halls, go to, mobile office sites when they have meetings, go to field hearings when they come to town. Get to know your representatives, because that's the best way, Rebecca, to really know, what it's like to be an elected official is watching, watching how they are, So that's just a couple of the things I would say. Was that helpful?
Yes, that's super helpful. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Any other questions, guys? No? You're so quiet. All right. Well, I'm gonna read some of these questions. What do you think, Monique? Should I
I think this was very fruitful. I think we're all just taking out in all this valuable wisdom and information. You can go wherever you would like to go. I think that we can probably focus on as by show of hands, do you guys plan on working on the Hill or in policy in some sort of way?
Yes. Actually, I had one more question.
Yeah.
The question was a little bit of what the young lady was mentioning before about getting your license and still working on the Hill. I want to go into macro, but I have a thing about just getting expertise. It's kind of to have that, because it is it's like a protected thing when you have this license. But you mentioned the LMSW. So is that a better thing?
It's not either or.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in most states, so this is the whole big thing going on right now in our profession is the licensing exam.
Okay.
So I'm not quite sure what it's going to look like in 6 months, but right now, you sit for the licensing exam just to say that you are competent in a generalist social work competence, right? But after you get a certain amount of clinical hours, then you can sit for the clinical license, which means you are competent in certain modalities and interventions or treatments, different therapeutic approaches, theories, models, and as far as pharmacological knowledge for treatment. So it focuses on the clinician, the therapist, right? Because you are providing medical care. So in some states, they have something that's called the LMSW. In 2 states in particular, I think it's Rhode Island and I think Illinois, they got rid of the ASWB test altogether. And when you graduate from an MSW program, you're licensed. So it's different in so many states. And that's one of the things that NASW is trying to figure out, where do we stand on this? ASWB is supposedly researching it. And a lot of social work board of examiners in different states are also researching it. Some of them are calling for a moratorium on the test because of its racial bias. But that's the difference, is that in order to be an LCSW, you have to sit for that exam. But in order to sit for that exam, you have to pass the LSW. So the LSW is the first one out the gate. Yeah. But the tricky part, though, about trying to receive LSW, LCSW while working on the Hill is that you will not have those kind of clinical interactions to garner the hours in order to sit for the exam. That cannot happen because you're not practicing interventions or therapy, right? So you couldn't sit for that exam because you didn't get the 3,200 hours or whatever the hours are for your state.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. That was a good question, though. I knew going into social work that I was a meso-macro person. And I was actually very frustrated in the MSW program 20 years ago because everything was clinical. And I was, the daughter of a 1960s social worker who was very much about group work and community organizing. And I thought that's what I was going to be learning instead of psychopathology and, quadrants and so on and so forth. And so it wasn't until a professor came to the program my second year that was the former commissioner of Health and Social Services, and had worked on 3 different governor's cabinets as an advisor and a commissioner, that modeled for me what macro social work was. And I think that that's important, that as you go out into the world, that you find those individuals that are doing the work that you're doing with the credential that you have, so that they can teach you, how they did it. I think it's important that you get comfortable with the fact that you may very well be the only social worker in the room, and that people have been misinformed as to who we are and what we can do. Not to be offended by it, but to see it as an opportunity to move people along and to really see the versatility of our degree and the multiple skills that we have that will benefit them. The job, for example, in Biden's office, I was up against 3 lawyers for my position, 3 lawyers and me. And I didn't see myself as a disadvantage. I felt that I was unique and that would benefit me because I would approach the work from a different perspective. And that's how I sold it. As a matter of fact, I explained how I saw the job in a way that the lawyers didn't fit that narrative. And I think that that's the most important thing that you can do when you go out into this workforce, is not to try to be what they all are, but to show them the value of who you are and what you uniquely bring. And what social work often does is we try to be everybody else because we want people to see our value, right? No, know your value and make them see it. That's what I do. So
I love that. We have about 5 or 6 more minutes before we have to join the big group. So any last questions or any areas that you guys would like to focus on? This is your time.
Well, can I share something with you guys, since I'm not going to go through that, but I wanted to share with you something that I often do when I am finally in a room and sitting down with an elected official. I call it the 4 no's, right? And so the first no is know the member. And when I say know the member, that could be the elected official or whoever it is, but know them. I don't mean know their legislative record. I mean, know them. Where did they go to school? How long have they been married? How many kids do they have? What's their favorite color? Google them until you can't Google them anymore. Know every single thing about them. What do they like? Are they a Beyonce fan? Whatever, everything, right? Because in conversation, it's making those connections that make the difference, right? So know the member, really know them. Second one is know the staff, especially the scheduler, executive assistant, the one who keeps their schedule or knows how to get you on the calendar. Know them well. Treat everyone with respect, right? Don't come in the door and think, I only want to talk to the congressperson. No, you want to talk to that secretary, that intern, somebody, the first person that you see at the door. Know the staff. Know who writes the legislative briefs. Know, and know them. Let them know you, because that's important. When things come up and they need a voice, they need somebody to testify, and the staff knows you, they'll call you. Know the member, know the staff, know the member, know the staff, know your issue. Do not call for a meeting or have an opportunity to meet with someone and you have to do research the night before. If you're going to advocate for something, that is your thing. You should be able to speak about it to anybody at any point, right? If you say that you're advocating for the unhoused population, well, what is the issue with homelessness throughout the country? Be that subject matter expert when you walk in there. And then the last one is know your ask. Do not leave without giving them something. And this is what I want you to do, right? I don't care if it's a small ask, but you don't want to waste time, because at the very beginning of the meeting, you should know your ask. And that should be it. Hi, my name is Marla Blunt Carter. I'm here today to talk about whatever, and at the end of this meeting, I hope that you will sign on to our letter of support. Know the member, know the staff, know the issue, know your ask. That's it. I just want to make sure when you walk in that office, you know what you're doing. And then the last, I can't share half of this stuff with you, but after you've done all of that, there are certain things that need to, really make it stick. You have to have a good reputation, right? You have to be one that if they were to ask about you, that the word on the street is that you get things done, or you're a person of integrity, right? And you need to be memorable. Be memorable. I don't care if you're the one with the funky red stilettos or something. You got to make it so that when you leave, they're like, you know what? That girl was, he really knew his stuff. Be memorable. Something. And the best way to be memorable is how you begin and how you end. I always tell people this as a professor. Sometimes in the middle, I'm like, the class wasn't okay. But if you start strong and you end strong, you can mess up in the middle and nobody will even remember it. They won't even remember it. So that's it. I appreciate you guys. I put my email in the chat. I am here for you. I want you to find me on LinkedIn so that I can follow up and, make things happen. But just know that advocacy is all about our 6 core values. Political advocacy is about that. It's about really being committed to, building relationships and operating with integrity, and rooting everything in social justice, while being competent, right? And at the end of the day, being of service. Those are our 6 core values. That's what it calls for us to do. So, yeah.
Thank you. Do you mind saying your email out loud? Because I don't know if I'm just a moderator and I can't see a chat, but I don't see no chat.
But you don't see no chat. So it's mbcarter@ssw.rutgers.edu.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you,
and we're
guys.
so thankful for all this information. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi. Hi, guys.
Hi. I just dropped in to say hello.
I know. I remember you from the campaign school.
Yes.
Good to see you again.
Likewise.
I'll see you guys at the closing.